Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Liverpool podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jesse Sarwar. It is Wildcard Wednesday across GSPN. And on today's podcast, we are looking ahead to Wednesday's big game against Everton. Now, it's such a big game that only one person could join me on today's episode to do it justice. It's the return of the Mac, Mr. Connor Norton. How's it going, Connor? How's that for an intro?
It was kind of you. That was kind of you. I actually think the last time I was on this podcast was building up to the Merseyside derby, the last Merseyside derby at Goodison, and it was delayed. So fingers crossed that doesn't happen again. How have you been, man? You've been good?
Yeah, very good. You know, just the games are just every 2 or 3 days. It just feels like every single episode that we do, we're saying, "All right, this is the one. This is really big. You know, a big game, and this could be crucial to Liverpool's title hopes." And it is, isn't it? I mean, let's have a quick word about the FA Cup though, because it was a disappointing way to go out in the FA Cup. I know people are saying, well, look, it's just the FA Cup and, we can concentrate on, the kind of bigger prizes that Liverpool are going for. But still, I think it was just disappointing to go out in that manner.
Yeah, I think it had kind of shades of Liverpool teams that I kind of grew up with. Those horrible FA Cup ties that we were put out against. I don't want to say minnows, but smaller. And it felt like, okay, you've had your fun as a Liverpool fan. This is what it used to be like. Remember this, appreciate this. It's not always like this at the minute, thankfully. I was so confident, I even said to my partner, you know what, actually, I don't really need to watch the match today because I think,
So many of us said that.
And bless her, she's a Blue, she's an Everton fan, and she's really, really, really enjoyed winding me up about it. So, so I think the less said about that, the better.
Friday's episode last week. Oh dear, my prediction. Just terrible.
I didn't hear it. What did you say?
4-0. Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, luckily I don't think anyone listened to it. So, but look, are we just writing this off as it's a cup defeat, not a priority, less games to play, or can this have any kind of effect? Can this kind of bleed into our Premier League title ambitions or the rest of the season? I remember last season losing to Manchester United in that FA Cup had a really, really devastating effect on the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. Is there any danger of a repeat of that, or are things different?
I think obviously the comparison with the United game, I think it's completely different, but it kind of feels similar, where it feels like I think the Cups, especially for Liverpool recently, because the squad has been so healthy, and Slot and Klopp before him have always said that he's felt really confident in the squad they've had. It's been a good competition to get these substitute players, get these not first teamers rhythm in their legs, and get them ready to come on and make impacts in games that ultimately do mean something. And by that I mean the 2 big trophies, the Premier League and the Champions League. So I think missing out on that, especially considering that the final of the, I nearly said Carling Cup, the final of the Carabao Cup is in March. After that, it's just the Premier League and the Champions League.
It's later than normal, though.
Normally it's end of February, I think.
February. Yeah.
Which is a bit strange, but we can get onto that too later. But I think it...
I just think that it just makes everything more congested because come in the middle of March, you're in the thick of that title run, the last kind of 10 games of the season. And then you've got a cup final right in the middle of that. So I think that could be quite significant. But with the cup defeat over the weekend, any criticism of Slot's team selection? I've heard quite a few saying that I don't like this kind of you disrespected the FA Cup, but there are a lot saying that look you should have played some of the bigger players. It was just too much of a change.
Yeah, I actually listened to the the review show with Carl and Louis, and I thought it was great. And I think it was Carl said that, there's a case to be made that even if Szoboszlai plays that game, Liverpool win. And I think at first I was like, that's one player. I'm not sure he makes a difference. But he really does, because he has the kind of industry and effort on the pitch that someone like, not to name names, but someone like Harvey Elliott just didn't show in that game. But I think when you look at it, the reason why Liverpool didn't win that game or weren't able to play their way was because that isn't a midfield that has played well together, played together in the starting team ever. So how are you expecting any of that rhythm to come through? I do have some issues with that, but ultimately the prizes that Liverpool are going for this year are bigger than the FA Cup, not to disrespect it. I just think whenever a big team gets put out by someone like Plymouth in that manner, you think, oh, we should talk about this, and we should, but at the same time, if Liverpool weren't in the position they were in, it would be such a bigger deal.
Yeah. I never understand this kind of disrespecting the FA Cup argument. Look, I'm an FA Cup romantic. I love the FA Cup. But the reality is that football has done this to the FA Cup. It's not Liverpool, it's not Arsenal, it's not Manchester City, but football has done this in the sense that the biggest prizes are the Champions League and the Premier League. Yeah. That's the only way that as a club you can sustain yourself in terms of being able to be financially competitive. You're not going to be financially competitive by focusing on the FA Cup as much as I would love for Liverpool to win the FA Cup. So I've never understood that argument. And I'm actually fully supportive of Arne Slot's team selection, because I think in many respects you are, when you're a manager of a big club, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you did play Szoboszlai, and he pulled a hamstring because he's the intensity with which he plays his game. I mentioned this last week. I don't know if you saw the League Cup semi-final win against Spurs.
Yeah.
There's a moment, it's the 91st minute. We are 4-0 up. And one of the Spurs, I think it was the left back who's got the ball in his own half. Szoboszlai is running around like an absolute lunatic. 91st minute, 4-0 up. And I'm just thinking, look, you have to have a rest. If you played him and he pulled his hamstring, who do you then trust to do that job in Liverpool's midfield in those big games? Because Jones is still touch and go with his fitness. It's why he didn't play at the weekend. So I just think, look, you've got to play your percentages. You cannot risk the likes of Van Dijk, Konate, Gravenberch, because those players are just irreplaceable. So I don't buy this argument if he'd played a stronger team. The senior players that played, the likes of Tsimikas, Jota, Diaz, Chiesa, come on, that's just those four players in that team should make you good enough to win that game, or at least be more of a threat up front. We just weren't a threat up front at all. So, but, I think that this argument that it could derail our season, I do think it's different from last season. I think losing against Manchester United when you're playing your full strength team, I think is different. I think a lot of the players.
The manner of the loss to last year was like, it was devastating. Liverpool have been pretty fortunate recently in their games against Man United, but that one was like a heartbreak for me. I hated every minute of that game. And this doesn't feel any more different. This feels totally different, sorry.
Yeah, because last season's game against United, it was the first team. And so that first team took that defeat into their next Premier League games. And so you can understand that they would feel demoralized, that it would affect them. But when 80-90% of the team that played against Plymouth is not going to play against Everton, then I think it's easier to compartmentalize that defeat. But look, you know what? It all depends now on how the Merseyside derby plays out in terms of the damage that that FA Cup exit could potentially have on our season. And we'll talk about that game right after this very, very short break. Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. Right, Merseyside derby, Everton versus Liverpool on Wednesday night. It's a 7:30 p.m. kickoff UK time. That's 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our listeners stateside. Could be a spate of illnesses hitting workers across the US on the Wednesday afternoon then, if it's an early kickoff. Look, it's a final Merseyside derby to be played at Goodison Park before the old stadium is demolished and a brand new stadium goes up in its place. Connor, a huge game for both teams. It's always a big game, as I said, Merseyside derby, but there's so much more riding on this one and a lot of emotion going into this particular game. Your thoughts on that?
I think it feels even bigger too, given the fact that it's Liverpool's game in hand. You know, it's a chance to go 9 points clear. Officially, Liverpool have been a few points clear of Arsenal for quite a while, but that game in hand has always kind of hung over them as like a Damoclesian sword. And now that it's there and there's a chance to earn the points, it feels like, oh no, this could go wrong. At least my heart's been going anyway. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it though. I really am. I think there's a lot of wrongs to be righted this season, and I think Liverpool are kind of on the path to doing that. And I think a big hurdle to get over now is going to Goodison, especially after last year. You know, I think Liverpool, by the time they got there, the title was kind of over anyway. But I still remember hearing and seeing the clips on socials of you lost the league at Goodison Park, and it was just rough. You know, we were talking about that United game. That was a heartbreak. Hearing that song was a dagger in the heart. So, yeah, I think it's going to be great.
Isn't it?
Big time, twisted the knife. I think it's going to be a great game. I think the game is probably going to be better now that David Moyes is the Everton manager too, because I feel like a lot's changed since we recorded that episode in December, and I think the state that Everton are in now, there's a little bit of hope there, and I think that might entice them to kind of give it more of a go. And I think if that happens, you're going to see a proper game between the two sides. I don't know, Jesse, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, look, like we said at the beginning of the episode, every game just feels like, okay, this is the one, this is the really big one. And I suppose that's natural if you're involved in a title race. Then, every game is critical. The Bournemouth game a couple of weeks ago felt like a really significant game, a really significant win because of the run that Bournemouth were on. Just like, there were, I think, 11 games undefeated, just on a sensational run of form. But this one, I was listening to Jamie Carragher last week, and I 100% agree with him that this is the biggest game of the season for Liverpool, not because it's Everton, but as you said, this is the game in hand. This is the card that we've had up our sleeve for what feels like, an age, and now it just feels like a critical moment. If we win this, we go 9 points clear of Arsenal, who celebrated their trophy win, when they beat City at the Emirates, by the way. And it could be a devastating blow for Arsenal. What a gut punch that would be. However, on the flip side, God forbid, if we were to drop points, if we were to lose, suddenly that 6 points, which is the same gap, but it's a more positive spin on that 6 point gap than it has been, for these last few weeks. But Connor, look, I'm going to put you on the spot. If we do beat Everton and go 9 points clear, is that it? Is that the title done?
I tell you what, I'll make you a deal, right? Not to give away the day that we're recording this, but today there was a piece that came out in The Athletic by Oliver Kay, and it was talking. You basically said that the next 5 games for Liverpool are so important because they play 5 games in February in the Premier League and only 1 game in March in the Premier
15
League.
days.
In over 15 days.
5 days, 5 games in 15 days.
Yeah. And I think, you look at those games that are coming up. So there's Villa away, City away, Newcastle at Anfield, Wolves as well. There's some pretty big games in there. I think we'll know for definite, maybe not definite, I'm getting too ahead of myself. We'll know more by the end of that. And I'll come on the podcast and I'll let you know how I feel then. I think I don't want to add more jeopardy to this game on Wednesday than needs to be, but yeah, go on. Yeah, I think if we beat Everton, there's a real good chance, isn't there?
Yeah, are we going to start? We're going to start chanting on the podcast. We're going to win the league.
No, absolutely not. You'll never get me doing that.
But it's so funny because I do remember when we started to go towards the top of the league, and I remember in November, people saying, pundits saying, "Look, you know what? At the end of November, after this run of games, we'll know more about this Liverpool title."
I think I said that as well. I'm sure I did. Yeah.
But I think what that shows you, though, is the strength of the Premier League. Because every month you're coming up against teams that, for example, Bournemouth, who would have thought at the start of the season that would have been a critical game?
Yeah.
Normally it's like Bournemouth, right, 3 points. But, they've been on such great form, and there are a lot of teams like that now that you think it's not as easy now. Fulham, a lot of teams who have got good progressive managers that are playing really good football and that can really hurt you. But, Everton, it's just one of those games where it's going to be blood and thunder. It's the fixture that's seen the most red cards, Everton versus Liverpool, 23 red cards. And get this, the most nil-nils, 12 in Premier League history. And obviously you mentioned that we lost 2-0 there last season. So there's no shocks for Liverpool in this game. We've got to make sure that we start really well, because I just think that if we make a sluggish start, I think we'll get torn to shreds.
Yeah, it feels like a game where, I don't know, I think I've only seen a little bit of Everton since Moyes came back in, but I think they have a bit more about them now. It looks like they kind of believe in themselves a bit more. And I think that's why, when I alluded to earlier, that I think we'll get more of a game this time. It won't be that cagey, Sean Dice football. It'll be, blood and thunder, like you said. I think the midfield's going to be so important. And we'll talk a little bit about individuals a bit later, but it does feel like a game where like the tone will be set from the offset. I know we'll also give our predicted lineups a little bit later, but that's why certain players I've included in mine make it, and I'm sure I'll reason for it then too. I'm just really excited for this game because I feel like it is a tone setter. And normally when Liverpool have had blips this season, although there's not been that many of them, the immediate result afterwards, or the immediate fixture afterwards, is like a course correction almost from Slot and his men. So I think it'll be a chance to kind of like, no. Okay, we might have screwed up on that time, but this is what we're really about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good. It's a really good point. I think the responses that the team have shown after a rare defeat, I think, is a really good sign. We've never followed a defeat with another defeat and gone on that kind of shaky run. It's always been a really kind of positive response that, okay, we've lost that game, let's get back on winning tracks. But do you think that an Arne Slot Liverpool is almost better equipped to deal with what's going to be a really kind of emotional Goodison atmosphere than a emotional Klopp Liverpool? Do you know what I mean? I'm just wondering whether we've got more about us in terms of dealing with that.
I think if you're talking about on the pitch, then absolutely. I think the way Liverpool play, especially when they're penning teams in. So I think Everton will play the way they've played recently, with 3 at the back, 4 across it in midfield. So it'll be 5 at the back if Liverpool pen them in. And I think that's the kind of, you'll see more joy out of an Arne Slot Liverpool team at being able to like pick pick passes through the lines and pull players out of position, whereas I don't think Klopp's team was great at that. But I will say, you could argue that, let's say, hypothetically, I don't want to bring it up, but let's say Everton win on Wednesday. Then all of a sudden it's, do Liverpool need a bit more passion in their team? They need a bit more, so it's one of those. And also, I'm not sure if under Arne Slot we'll ever see a Divock Origi last minute winner, that kind of goal again, especially against Everton. And all the passion and emotion that came out of that result is probably one of my top 3 moments ever supporting Liverpool under Klopp.
You can't see Arne Slot running onto the pitch and jumping on Alisson right in the middle of
I think it would be Van Dijk, but no, I don't think he would jump on him. But yeah, we'll see. I think, especially because it's the first Merseyside derby that Arne Slot's managed in as well, so I think there's lots of kind of tone to be set for me for Liverpool in this game, and I think that's the most important thing. Set the tone, get the points, and just get out of there. It doesn't matter how we do it. Get the points and get out of there.
He's. I don't know if you heard his quote in the press conference, Arne Slot, because he was asked about the kind of passion and commitment that's going to be needed in a derby game, and Slot said, "We need cool heads, but not cool legs."
Yeah,
meaning that. So that obviously we need that 100% commitment, intensity, but don't get drawn into fouls and doing something silly. And just to, I suppose, just to give a little insight in terms of the kind of detail that these managers and their kind of modern backroom staffs go into. He actually mentions that in last season's 2-0 defeat, the referee apparently gave 11 free kicks in the first 10 minutes of the game, 10 of them going to Everton.
Yeah,
and so he's warned against that, because obviously giving away free kicks is just going to invite that kind of, aerial bombardment.
Mm-hmm. And especially if you look at one of the players that has now kind of come in under David Moyes, Jack O'Brien, who is absolutely massive, who you would have thought would be an ideal Sean Dyche player, by the way, but for whatever reason wasn't. He looks like a threat to me. I think he might be a set piece danger for Liverpool already, but also set pieces aren't really Liverpool's strong suit when it comes to attacking them either. So it might suit Everton. It might suit Everton to break the game down and get really scrappy. So you kind of do, you need to keep your head cool and your legs warm. So I like that quote from Slot. That was pretty funny.
Well, let's talk in a bit more detail then about the kind of team that we expect to come out against Everton. So let's get into a predicted lineup and a score prediction. Hopefully my score prediction is going to be a bit more accurate than the Plymouth one. But in goal, I guess we're expecting Alisson to come, back in ahead of Kelleher for this one.
Yeah, I think now that Alisson's fully up to it, for me, he plays every game now going forward, except maybe the cup final. But we'll see how we're doing by then. Yeah, I think Alisson comes in. He's experienced. He's played in derbies before. I think all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously we're expecting Konate and Van Dijk to come back in. It was disappointing to see Joe Gomez, going off injured so soon after he, returned after quite a long layoff, and that could be potentially quite a big blow for Liverpool. Bearing in mind that we've already mentioned that we've got 5 Premier League games in 15 days, and you do worry about the likes of particularly Konate. He doesn't have the best track record in terms of consecutive games, and even with someone like Van Dijk, the load of games that he's being expected to manage at this stage of the season is a concern when you've got Gomez is really experienced and he's out now, and then really you've only got Kwanzaa as a backup.
Mm-hmm. I think I agree with you, and also it's more reason for Slot to have picked the team he did on the weekend against Plymouth, because you're right, the fixture pile up is getting kind of crazy at the minute, and also you've seen Endo now step into centre back recently too, and I think we might see that happen as well. I'm not sure whether it's in the game against Wolves or wherever, if it will happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens, because I don't know, I thought Kwanzaa was something doesn't seem right with him this season, and I don't know what it is. I think it's just confidence really, and lack of rhythm, and it's probably pretty hard having to come on and off as frequently as he has done. So yeah, I think Van Dijk, Konate start for me, and they start going forward, but Konate's minutes are there's kind of an asterisk there of whether or not he'll keep featuring.
Yeah. And we are, we're coming to that critical phase of the season. I suppose it does call into question again our kind of transfer strategy or the lack of transfer activity in the transfer windows. I really did think that in this January window, we needed to have got just one defender in. And I don't know why they didn't, whether it's just because whoever is on our target list wasn't available. But, I do think that we are light there. And I think that it's the only thing that can potentially derail us.
Mm.
But, Konate, Van Dijk. I think the fullbacks is where I think it's going to be quite interesting. I start with Robertson. I think he comes straight in, and I think the performance by Tsimikas, and I don't want to kind of judge him on just one game because I think he's had a good season.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that that's probably a reminder for me anyway that Tsimikas is not a number one. I think he's a good number two. I think he's someone that can come in and do a job, but I don't think he's as reliable to be Liverpool's week in, week out number one. And I think the Plymouth game, I think it did highlight that in the sense that I don't think that Liverpool play as badly if Robertson is in there as our captain. Because if he does play, he'll be captain.
Mm.
And, there'd been, whatever you say about Robertson, he might have had a few shaky performances here and there, but his effort and his commitment, he would not allow Liverpool to kind of drop in terms of their standards. And I just don't see that from Tsimikas. So I do expect Robertson to play. And I do think that for this game, I think that despite Trent Alexander-Arnold, Slot said that he trained partially today and they're going to have a full fitness test tomorrow to see whether he passes the fitness test to be available for Wednesday night. But I think even if he passes that test, I think Connor Bradley should play. It's a blood and thunder fixture, and I just think he's more suited to that fixture than someone like Trent.
So do I. I think it seems pretty obvious as well because you've seen Connor Bradley in these big games, big moments throughout his short Liverpool career, but his very impressive Liverpool career so far. And whatever challenge that he's met with, he rises to, and not just rises to, but surpasses. I thought he kind of set the tone in that second leg of the semi-final in the Carabao Cup. I thought he was just phenomenal. I mean, the whole team was. It was a real complete performance. And actually, I've been quite verbally very out on Andy Robertson this season, but I thought Robertson showed why he's still important to that side in that semi-final too. So I agree. Those two fullbacks start for me, and I think Connor Bradley's energy is essential for this. And you know what? If Trent's fit enough to bring him off the bench, what a luxury to have, because we're going to need both of those fullbacks going forward. So yeah.
Moving on to the midfield, and I think this is potentially quite significant. We spoke about last season about, we lost to Everton 2-0 last season. I think Ryan Gravenberch, I think that's the kind of X factor that we didn't have last season. He obviously wasn't playing in that position last season. And I just think that when a player like that gets a foothold in this game, I think it could be the difference maker. And I do expect that Liverpool will try in that first 15 to 20 minutes to kind of lower the temperature or calm the Goodison crowd down and, keep hold of the ball, keep possession, find those lines. And the man to do that is Gravenberch.
Yeah, completely agree. I think if you look at how I think Everton will line up, I think they'll probably have Doucouré and that's the player in Jai kind of just behind the striker. So they'll be kind of in combat with Gravenberch and McAllister, who I've also picked to spoil my next midfielder selection. And I think that midfield battle, those two versus those two, is just so important. And I think Gravenberch's got that kind of, he's silky enough to slip the press, and he's good enough on the ball to find a man. He's also smart enough to cool the game down. He can drop deeper into midfield. He can go out to the flanks and kind of help out on the right-hand side if Connor Bradley's getting targeted, because you could see Decore pulling over to that side. So, I just think he's got it all. He's a complete midfielder, and I'm very, very, very glad I bought Ryan Gravenberch stock at the start of the season, because I suddenly feel like a millionaire now. So yeah, I think he you said X Factor, Jesse, and I think you're right.
And I think he brings the best out of the guy next to him, which is McAllister.
Oh yeah, completely agree.
Who look, I think he's a world-class player anyway, but I just think that this season, alongside Gravenberch, I just think he's just such a heartbeat of Liverpool's midfield now. And again, he's someone that I think will thrive in this fixture. He's and I love these players. I love your typical Argentine. I love your typical Uruguayan who just goes in full-blooded, and he's that guy. And he's not going to shirk from any challenge, but at the same time, he's quite disciplined. So, yeah, Gravenberch and McAllister come in. And, let's complete that first choice, shoe-in position every week, and that's Szoboszlai. He has been outstanding this season, and his intensity, I think, is just going to be so important in this game.
I think he's kind of... There's been so many question marks about Szoboszlai, specifically this year, I think, because when he first came into at Liverpool, everyone was like, oh my God, he's Gerrard reincarnated. He isn't. He scored a few goals. He still isn't. But now looking at him, he's kind of like second striker, midfield, dynamo, presses everywhere, all over the pitch, has the engine of Jordan Henderson and James Milner, and the tenacity of somebody like Andy Robertson or Darwin. He's just come on leaps and bounds, and he's still young enough that I think he can go even higher. It's difficult because I know Curtis Jones isn't fit. You'd want a Scouser in your team just because it's the Merseyside derby. They know what it means. But I think none of those midfielders deserve to be dropped at all. And if anything, though, that is the first choice midfield now going forward. Every big game is those three. And Szoboszlai could be argued, which is insane now, he might be the most important right now. I don't know. You could say it.
No, it's a fair shout. And I think 100% that is our first choice midfield. And Szoboszlai, I've said this last week, I think he's fast becoming the complete midfielder. And you kind of hit the nail on the head there. He's got the engine of a Jordan Henderson. He's got the tenacity, but he's a very skillful player.
Yeah.
He's a very skillful player. He's he can score goals. He's starting to assist as well now. So look, I think he's an absolute shoe inside. That I think will be the midfield. And then I think the only question mark for me up front, I've gone for Salah, which obviously it's a big game. You have to have your biggest player in that front lineup. And, I would imagine he's so pumped up for this game to score. I think Gakpo has now put himself firmly in that starting lineup as an absolute starter now for Liverpool, because again, this season, he's just moved up a different level now, and he's so consistent in his performances. He's showing parts of his game that I'm sure a lot of Liverpool supporters didn't know that he had in his locker when we first saw him arrive at Anfield. And then so really for me, it's just that central position, because now we've got Núñez, Jota, and probably Diaz fighting out for that central position. So what do you think? Because Jota had a really disappointing game against Plymouth, but I'm prepared to write that off as an off day. I just think he's too important for us as a goal scorer. But the question is, do you trust Núñez in what could be a potentially really volatile game? Or, do you go for someone that's a bit more industrious in Diaz, or do you just want a finisher in Jota the Slotter up front?
They're all great options, I think. I think maybe a little bit of the fact that Jota and Diaz played 90 minutes against Plymouth signal that it's not their game. And you know what? Even if they had played 65 minutes and came off, I don't think either of them warranted a position in this game. I think both of them were so poor. I agree with you that I think I can write off Jota's game, but I think he's got a lot to prove this season. And if he starts picking up more injuries, I would happily wash my hands of him. And I really think if Diaz, I would, but just because I think it's such an easy area to upgrade that forward position, because it's the only position on the pitch that Liverpool aren't settled on one player there. So, and we could also probably recoup some money for any of them there. But that's for another episode. Diaz, you've seen what he was like against a back three when we played against Leverkusen, and he was insanely good. But I just don't think he's looked that sharp recently. And I know Nunez is a bit of a loose cannon, but I just think for the aerial presence, for the combative nature, for the tenacity, I think he has to play. I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, I've got Nunez as the starting 9.
Yeah, no, I've gone for Nunez as well, because I just think that it is a risk in terms of his his volatility, his unpredictability. But I think you've got to look at it positively. I think this is the kind of game, it is a big game. It's under the lights. And I think it's such an important game for Liverpool that I think that if he were to score and win this game for Liverpool, I mean, what a boost that would be for him for the rest of the season. Yeah. Knowing that we still got the likes of Jota on the bench, and he's not always going to be on the bench. He's going to get his fair share of games. But yeah, I've gone for Nunez as well. So let's see. So let's move on to a score prediction then. I'm gonna go out there straight away and say that I'm backing us for a 2-0.
I've also written down 2-0, but I want to give you something different. My reasons for the 2-0, though, just quickly, were that I think that Liverpool will go in with that mentality that we talked about. They'll try and take the sting out of the game. I think they'll probably face quite a few nasty counter-attacks, and it'll be quite physical. There'll be a few set pieces that go awry, I'm imagining. But I just think, in terms of X factor all over the pitch, Liverpool have it in at least a few positions now. So I think that should hopefully get us through. And if that's what gets us through, that's what gets us through. But hopefully we score more than one. So if you're going to say 2-0, I'll say 3-1.
Okay, let's see what happens. But the game is on Wednesday night. We'll have an immediate post-match reaction of that game, which is, hopefully 3 points for Liverpool. But that's all for today. Give us a follow on your preferred podcast platform so that you get the very latest content when it does drop. We are now on YouTube, so check us out on the Global Sports Podcast Network YouTube page. Follow us on social media at GSPN Liverpool. You can email us at gspndailyliverpool@gmail.com. As I said, join us again tomorrow as we review the Merseyside derby against Everton. For myself and Connor, thank you for listening.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.